I've heard bad performances which received as much applause as good performances. Have you ever been to a concert yourself where you have heard booing or you yourself have booed? It seems to be not in the standard equipment anymore of disliking anything.
No, I think the only concert where there has been booing was I remember in Marlborough when a modern piece was played, where a lot of the piece was inside the piano, and I remember some people booing in
Mm-hmm.
that. But otherwise, no, you're right. People are very polite, probably half disinterested.
Mm-hmm. Half disinterested.
Yes.
Yeah. Once when Arthur Rubinstein, I was talking to Arthur Rubinstein, and the day before I played the B-flat sonata of Schubert, and there was a lot of applause after the first movement, and I myself resented it. And when I talked to him, I said, um, the audience applauded. Didn't that hurt your concentration? And he said, no. How do you feel about that?
No, I also agree. Especially in classical works, it's a very and at that time, it's interesting. Chopin. You look at programs. Chopin would play the first movement of his piano concerto. Then there would be lots of arias, and people would play trios, and other things would happen. And then at the end of the program, the second movement and the last movement. So the same thing with the Hafner Symphony when it was played for the first time. Its first movement was played, then there was something else, then
Mm-hmm.
the second and third movement was played, and the finale was left to the end of the concert. So these unities, which I think do exist, and this respect for the total entity, which I feel is important, nevertheless, the composers didn't quite have the same degree of respect for it, and I also, it doesn't bother me very much.
How interesting. So in that sense, Murray, you don't lose confidence in your audience thinking they don't know the
No,
work.
no, not at all.
Yeah. But you brought up an interesting point about the way music used to be constructed in programs, and I find something fascinating here. Maybe the record player, the LP itself, has made us listen more with unity in mind and psychology, the cyclic aspects. Once a Chopin prelude, 5 of them would suffice, and now people don't
Yes.
like that. They want to hear all 24.
Yes.
You think that came from record listening?
It's possible. I've never really thought about it. I think, it's part of a trend towards urtext, towards fidelity to the text, and respecting the composer's wishes, and trying to find a unity. Maybe to some extent psychoanalysis is part of that, trying to see everything unified. And I don't necessarily think it's a bad trend, because I think that it's a very valuable trend. It's just an aspect of our times.
Yeah, and indeed, when Schumann once wrote to Clara and said, "Well, we don't play all of Carnival or Symphonic Etudes."
Yes,
The public
quite.
today we wouldn't tolerate that
Yes.
because the psychology even of a dance of a suite is important to us.
That's right. But at many of the first performances of Schumann's piano music, a lot of the pieces of the Carnival, when Liszt played them, were left out. That's true.
How interesting. How should a government participate in the arts? For instance, the United States, this country spends less money on the arts than any Western nation. Is this bad in the long run?
I'm not a politician. I don't know. I know I live in London, and I spend a lot of time there, and I can't tell you the value of something like the BBC. It has such a national importance. What's on the radio? People know what to listen for. In other words, if Tippett, for instance, is having a new opera, the fact that much of the BBC programming will be revolving around that. They'll do the first performance live. They'll interview Tippett. They'll have a lot of his music, a lot of his influences. And that's only one aspect, the modern music. They'll do the same for any musician that comes to London, and you get an idea of their works, their totality. You can't ignore events. They have a kind of national importance, and they also they have very little record time. I think it's 1 hour the most a day of record time. The rest is live performances, so that gives the opportunity for kids and for
Amazing.
young people and for talent, older people too, that don't have a chance to play very much. It gets people much more interested in playing and less competitive, I've noticed. So I feel that the public radio, if it could really take the advantage like the BBC has, would be of an incredible benefit.
Fantastic. Do you feel that you should yourself take any stance against what's going on today, worldwide nuclear disarmament, participate, say, in an organization such as PAND, which is called Performing Artists for Nuclear.
I don't know. You know, it's a difficult question, and I feel basically that I don't know enough about it to come out very strongly. Of course, I think that a nation spending a lot on means of destruction is a terrible thing. But at the same time, I'm not as sure that one should be a martyr. So I can't make decisions that are not in my sphere to really make them.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel I can have beliefs that are strong. But you see, once you become any kind of public person and start making pronouncements about things that you don't know about, I think it's a bit dangerous.
Mm-hmm. Every year, more and more musicians graduate from schools, and many people with ability, Murray, leave music yearly. So few really make the careers, and they weren't there thinking that, oh, I will teach or I will do something else, and they are bitterly disappointed. Should a teacher, or should be part of the education, really discourage the many musicians to get out, or never to go to a conservatory?
That sounds cruel, but I don't think it is. I think it's not a bad idea. If a person doesn't really have the capacity to fulfill himself in a certain field, I don't think he should be encouraged blindly simply for
For love of it.
Well, he can love it in his spare time, but he
Mhm.
has to think about his life and make plans and things. And I think he shouldn't be encouraged because a teacher either wants money or doesn't have the nerve to say, well, no, you shouldn't do this. I think that a teacher, to some extent, should help make
Mhm.
a decision, and the conservatory should be very strict in who they take and who they shouldn't take.
Mhm. You said the word money. We seldom talk at all about the business of a concert pianist, and so few people even get to play free concerts, let alone make money out of it. Has this always amazed you that you're paid for this?
Well, at the beginning it did. Now I'm getting used to it.
And expected.
And expected. Well, it is my living, and I feel it's a right to it. It's wonderful that I love making my living, but I have to make my living.
Is it a bad way to make a living for most people, though? Because
In music?
yeah,
I think it could be great.
if you have the right breaks or what?
No, if you keep to a love of it, if you don't let the things destroy you. I mean, if you don't let routine get in the way, and you try to, for instance, orchestral musicians should not get browbeaten by conductors that they don't like. They should try to discover things in the music. It's easier said than done, of
Mhm.
course. But I think the main thing is to keep the love of music alive. Once
Mhm.
that happens, then you can only enjoy it, and not let the technical things, the routine things, the drudgery get to you. I don't think they're important.
Hmm. What are the most successful pieces in your repertory in the big public response? That you hear it on stage, you know that they're getting it.
The public seems to respond a lot to pieces like the Appassionata Sonata, pieces like the Schubert Fantasy, some of the big Liszt pieces. I don't play many of them, but for instance, the Liszt Sonata seems to get a good response.
Even though it's half hour in length.
Yes,
Mhm.
yes, it doesn't seem to matter.
Is this because these are dramatic works?
I think so.
Why are there fewer women pianists professionally still? Leshatitsky once said, I don't want to take a woman pianist because she's going to get married and, all the 5 years of work is going to go down the drain.
It must be very difficult for women to I think in any profession, to have a profession and to have a life as a mother and a wife or whatever. But I can't really answer that question. I really wouldn't know.
Do you think there's a masculine and feminine playing? When you hear a record, could you say that's a woman or a man?
Very often I can. And yet I wonder, this is an interesting question, because I even wonder whether that would be described as necessarily feminine playing, what I
yes.
hear. I think that in a man there's certainly masculine and feminine elements, and certain aspects of music demand a more, what I would call feminine, gentle side,
Mhm.
and certain of them demand a more masculine side. It's a difficult you can't say this is feminine, this is masculine. I think they're constantly interchanging. But for me, sometimes the Eusebius nature of Schumann is more feminine, and that doesn't mean that women pianists necessarily play that better. Not sure of that.
How does constant touring affect important relationships, friendships?
Well, my most important relationship is to my wife, and she's with me most of the tour, and
I
that gives
see.
me great support. And I feel that that's, for me, a very important emotional outlet, so that the tensions, the difficulties of the concert life can get dissipated in a completely stable relationship.
So with the touring, do you sometimes resent the stage, or do you feel that the stage
No.
is your home?
Not quite that, but at the same time, I like performing. I get nervous, of course, for it, so it's not as relaxed as home. But it's not only performing, it's getting to know the music, and I feel that I know the music through performing it, not just through practicing it. I don't feel for me that that's enough.
Are critics necessary to the concert experience and afterward?
I feel they're very necessary, though I know a lot of people disagree with me and feel that critics could be pushed aside. I don't feel they often do their job well, because I don't think their job has been defined. I personally, and this is a very personal view, take the view that it's a critic's function to teach his community what great music is about, and what great music demands in performance, for instance, and helps educate the public in the trends of where great music is going, what is happening, for instance, to tonality, why is a piece of Beethoven great, so that the audience can understand it, so they can have a relationship to music, and that the music is the most important thing that comes through the relationship between the critic, its readers, and then the audience. They become a better audience. They can distinguish performances in their truthfulness to what music is about. And I think it's dangerous for critics to go on tangents of personal taste too much, although it's very important, but they have to be constantly trained towards understanding what makes a piece of music great, and not riding hobby horses. I feel that's a very personal view.
Yes. Have you ever thought of this subject when you play the piano, and the piano has had such a worldwide currency? Do you think of it as a democratic instrument, contrasted, say, with the harpsichord, which is an aristocratic instrument?
No, I don't think in those terms. It's too complicated to get into, but I don't think in those terms.
Do high prices keep students and the poor out of your concerts?
Yes, that's something I think that is an important problem, and that I don't know myself how to rectify it, but I think it should be rectified.
What is a successful performance to you? When you leave, do you have misgivings about it? Today you've just played. How do you feel about the way you played the Mendelssohn, for instance?
Well, always I have mixed feelings. This could have gone better, that could have gone better. The main thing in a performance, and that happens very rarely, is if one can really truly get inspired and can reach a totally different realm than one has prepared. For me, the magic is this not knowing, and that can happen when one really and truly lets go, and that's very rare.
Do you, Murray, prefer playing miniatures, or a set of Chopin preludes, or a sonata? Which is the easier task in front of the public?
I think that they're both, in their way, very hard. I think it's very hard to play a miniature very well, because so much is demanded. At the same time, the architecture of a sonata, like the slow movement of the Opus 10 No. 3, to put that together takes a great deal of concentration, the moods melting into each other, trying to maintain attention all the way through. I think they're totally different. They're equally demanding. Somehow, I would opt for the big sonata, because it's a more monumental achievement in the end.
Now, you're constantly on trains, planes, not trains anymore, but what refreshes you when you have those couple of months off? Do you climb mountains? You go to an ocean?
No, actually, I take very little time off. I take about 5 days at a time. I'm going to take 5 days now, and in the summer I'll take 5 days. And the rest of the time I learn new repertoire, which isn't only drudgery and learning notes, but a lot of it is spent uh, studying the other works that the composer wrote, which I find very enjoyable. For instance, with Schubert, I'll go through all the sonatas, go through the quartets, and this summer, for instance, I went through one of the operas. I want to go through two or three more, although they were disappointments.
Mhm.
I want to see altogether what Schubert was about, read about him, and get to have a complete idea of the composer.
This gives a fuller interpretation.
Yes, it's a lot of fun.
Yes, you
actually.
read biographies
Yeah.
as well and so forth.
Yeah, musical biographies in that I don't like to get too much into the personal things, although they help, but I like to know what the composer's influences were musically. What was he interested in? What was he trying to do musically? And I find, for instance, Einstein's biographies of both Schubert and especially Mozart very valuable.
Hmm.
in that
From
point.
that question, let me ask you about ranking. Would an abstract work, a Schubert impromptu, be of a higher order for you as a listener, as a pianist, as an artist, than a song where the words characterize what the music will be about in a sense?
Each has its own difficulties, and it's hard to say of a song from the Winterreise. The depth of its emotion is not said in the words. That's what's magical about the music, that it says things that the words can't say. The words lead in some direction, and we can also know what was in the composer's mind because certain harmonies are connected with certain things, certain motives are connected with certain other things. There is a language that the composer speaks. At the same time, music says things that words can't say, and to get into those emotions, I think that's what the magic is about.
Hmm. Rubinstein said it was a singer who led him into the world of the sound he wanted to create. Horowitz was crazy about a baritone, Rachmaninoff about Shaliapin, Chopin about tenors. Has a singer been of monumental influence to you?
I think Peter Pearce was a very important influence in that I accompanied him and have his voice in my mind very often. Janet Baker, for instance, is another singer whose voice, and Maria Callas is another singer who I admire very much. Yes, I do listen to singers, and I do try to do that. At the same time, I also feel orchestras and orchestral playing is of very much importance, and trying to imitate sounds of orchestral sounds is, for me, very important.
Now, do you envy? No, I'll ask you this: do you ever, outside of serious music, do you ever listen to folk music or country music or rock music?
No, I don't listen. No.
It has no meaning to you.
I don't, no.
All right. Now, do you ever envy? You see these fantastic festivals, and some rock musician, some modern day descendant of a sexual superstar like Liszt, gets out on the stage, and his hair is long too, except in 100 years later he's also not allowed to wear, he doesn't have to wear a shirt. You envy this amazing impact he has on an audience. They get so excited that they're screaming through the piece.
No, I don't envy it, but I find it's rather sad. Because it shows that the level of culture is much more instant. It's like instant culture, instant excitement. The nerves are very thin, and so I feel this augurs badly for the art, because people don't have the patience to understand something a little bit more profound, let's say, than an instant. I don't know. Let's say it's sexual thrill, whatever it is. It hits you over the head, and I find that a little bit depressing.
Murray, in our society, very little is now committed to memory. Indeed, even musicians, excepting pianists, seldom commit music to memory. Do you think that an education and the training of memory is lacking today all over? I mean, we used to memorize passages from Shakespeare or poetry, and we don't do that anymore.
I think you have a very good point, and I myself feel very strongly that musicians should know the piece that they're playing from memory. Even if they're playing in a quartet, though that's much more difficult, of course. I know the Polish quartet played without music, and I feel that unless you can play without music, you don't really know the piece completely. That doesn't mean you should play without music if you don't feel comfortable. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that you should know the piece from memory.
Let's say by some horrible thing that you were you were imprisoned and you were no longer able to hear great music or play it, could you survive?
Well, it would be difficult, but I can hear great music all the time because I can hear it inside my head. I don't need, a record player or something like that. I can put on a record here in my mind and hear it for, I don't know, however long it is.
Is it your performance?
Yes, in some way. But I can hear symphonies, you see.
Yes.
I can go through a piece I know, like the Schubert C major quintet. I can get through much of the first movement. Certainly the unfinished symphony, that I can go through. So I could live for a while on the stuff that I've known.
How wonderful. Fabulous. We have often heard that artists are temperamental. Are they more so than the non-artist? It has been said also that many artists are neurotic. Do you think that this is a part of the equipment to be neurotic? We're suppressed or something, and Beethoven then wrote a symphony out of his frustration.
I don't know whether that's the case. I know that they show it more than other people that do 9-to-5 jobs. But at the same time, maybe they show it in subtle ways, those people. I think we all have problems living. I think it's difficult to live in an industrial and mechanical age. And I think the people that think about it more suffer about it more. So an artist is thinking about it because he's thinking about the emotions all the time. So he's tending to suffer a little bit more. It's as simple as that.
Exactly. Have you ever thought about the tremendous amount of Jewish pianists the world has produced?
Well,
from every country.
I would have thought more violinists, actually. I'm not sure about pianists. Argerich, Arau, who else? Richter. I'm not sure about Gilels is probably Jewish.
Yes.
But no, there are a lot of non-Jewish pianists. But violinists, it's hard to mention. I mean, except for Kyung Hwa Chung. So I don't know. It's true that there are a lot of Jewish recreative artists.
Yeah.
Not creative, strangely enough.
Yeah. Well, there are painters and so forth.
Painters.
I want to ask you, what are the most difficult pieces of, for instance, Chopin that you yourself have studied?
It's hard to say. You see, difficulties are in so many ways. There are certain kinds of difficulties which are, for instance, you find in a small piece to bring out every nuance, in a big piece to maintain the line, certain kind of passage work that's difficult, certain kind of octave work that's difficult. Everything has its own difficulties, so it's hard to say which is the most difficult. I couldn't answer that.
So you hardly think of just the digital.
Well, I hardly classify something as most difficult. It's all very difficult. To play a slow movement of a Beethoven sonata is in some ways as hard, if not harder, who can say, than to play the last movement of the Wanderer Fantasy. It's very hard for me to tell you.
I asked, these are great answers. I asked Ashkenazi, I said, are we still in the dark age? Are we in the dark ages now? And he says, the human race has always been in the dark ages. What are the chief things dividing the human race at this point? Is it nationalism?
I don't know. It's too complicated. I'm not a politician.
Okay.